welcome to today's Study Group SE. Today is Book Club. We are doing Impossible Conversation, Chapter 5. This is the fourth of this series of book clubs. There will be 2 more. A special note, we are taking next week off, so the next book club will be the following week. This book club is specifically for people who have read the book and for people who haven't read the book. If you haven't read the book, then I hope to give you about 10% of the word count, about 30% of the useful. Chapter 5, Advanced Skills for Contentious Conversations, How to Rethink Your Conversational Habits. Oh, by the way, in the text chat, there should be a link. Somebody in the production team put it in place for the document that I'm working on. You can see the document if you prefer text, and this document is mostly prepared by Gigi and myself, and it contains what I'm working on. In this chapter, we will be discussing more advanced ways of managing more tense conversation. The skills covered will include keeping Rappaport's rules. I'll discuss what Rappaport's rules are. I'll describe mirroring your partner's point, listing where you agree with them, and say what you learned. Only after all that, say what you disagree. So Rappaport's rules have an order. You want to give as much positive before you give any negative. Second, avoid facts. Again, shoot your messengers, leave facts out of it. 3, seek disconfirmation. We'll define disconfirmation on page 104 or so when we get to that, I promise. How could a belief be inaccurate? Yes, and. This is keeping but out of your conversation. And dealing with anger. Managing negative emotions and when to walk away. This includes knowing your own triggers. All right. In keeping Rappaport's rules, I have a dialogue I'd like to have read. I think my people are Gigi and a guest, Anthony, playing Anthony Magnabosco. In this brief dialogue, Anthony Magnabosco, the street epistemologist whose dialogue we showcased in Chapter 2, is conversing with a stranger, Carrie, played today by Gigi. They're discussing faith, belief, and God. Can Anthony and yes, are you able to speak and be heard?
Yes, I'm ready.
Yes, thank you. Okay, would you start at the beginning? If it wasn't the God that...
If it wasn't the God that helped you through that difficult time and it really was yourself, how could you figure it out?
I think that's where faith comes in.
Faith would help you figure out that it wasn't the God?
No, I think faith is where you believe that what was truly working in your life.
I'm going to rephrase this, and if this isn't what you're saying, let me know. I don't want to misrepresent your position. But are you saying that the way that you're so certain that it was the God that helped you out of that situation, the reason why you can say that you know it is because you have faith that it happened?
I have faith in something above and beyond that's more powerful than me. I have a belief.
The Russian-born American game theorist Anatole Rappaport had a list of rules for offering disagreement or criticism in conversations. Mirror your partner's position so clearly and fairly that they say, I wish I'd thought of putting it that way. This allows you to this shows that you attempted to understand their position. Even if you're not successful, you're usually going to get the points for trying. Oftentimes this is called steel manning, and just from my own jargon, I want to hold steel man for the long form version. I want to call this mirroring or playback or reflection. Say where you agree, especially where disagreement is common. Find something in what they say that you can agree with, speak it out. You will build rapport based on what you have in common. Make your agreement plain so that you can use it in the if the conversation gets stuck or heated. Don't just say, "Oh yeah, I agree." No, spell out what you agree to so that it can become memorable, useful. Tell your target what you learned from them. Finger sign. Tell your target what you learned from them. This will model respect and mutual willingness to learn. If you learned anything new from your partner, tell them and encourage them to do the same. Only after that should you say anything, criticism, or disagreement. These bring together and build upon the themes and skills from the first 3 chapters. Practice understanding before you refute. When I say first 3 chapters, I'm discounting chapter 1 because it's an introduction. So chapters 3 and 4 is what first 3. Okay, so we would like to practice some skills. I open it to whomever to speak on this. Could you give an example of a hypothetical example of reflecting back? I'm going to just start with giving you a steel man to play with. I think that there is truth in all stories. There's some nugget of truth everywhere. And therefore, I believe that Grimm's fairy tales actually happen. Would anybody like to reflect back on that? Let's see. There's a whole bunch of people in the room, and I think we might be having technical problems with people not being able to be heard. Can anybody speak up, say hello where I can hear you?
Test.
I'm going to assume. Oh, go ahead. Thank you.
That was just me, Anthony. Just testing it out for you.
Okay. Thank you. So yes, people can be heard. Would anybody like to reflect back what I said about Grimm's fairy tales? And maybe find areas in which you disagree, or no, but first agree. Clearly the room is far too full for anybody who's not an extrovert. I understand that one. Okay, so I'll just demonstrate the reflection. First of all, my chickens, they are a feature on this show, so that's exciting. Oh, and some people don't have permission to speak. Okay. Cull, do you have an example of reflecting back on Grimm's fairy tales? I hear somebody typing.
I can take it if you want, Dolly.
Yes, please.
Okay, so let's see if I remember this right. So if I understood what you said correctly, you have an idea that stories can be considered to be truth. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. There's some truth in all stories.
Okay. Do you want me to continue reflecting back, or what?
No, that's probably enough. Let's move on to avoid facts. Thank you for that. In the next section, avoid facts. In earlier book club shows, we discussed leaving facts out of the conversation, as they are unlikely to change your partner's mind in some extreme cases, and might result in the interlocutor becoming more entrenched in their beliefs. The authors cite Ken Ham, the founder of the Ark Encounter, as a notable example. When asked in a debate against Bill Nye what would change his mind, he said, "Nothing. Nothing would change his mind." Bad facts. Bad. A common mistake is thinking that people believe what they do out of ignorance or out of a lack of evidence. They think that if people were presented with the missing facts or evidence, they would instantly drop or change their beliefs. The truth is, most people do not consider evidence in forming their beliefs, instead picking out evidence that supports a belief they already hold. Creationism is a perfect example. Evolution is overwhelmingly accepted as fact by the people that study it, and accepted and supported by evidence, plenty of it. Offering evidence almost never changes minds if morality, social values, or identity are at stake. First, do no harm. If a wrong belief can harm someone, pushing someone to hold wrong beliefs could be harmful to them. If you know that facts and evidence lead to backfire, doubling down, and entrenchment, avoid facts and evidence. It seems very counterintuitive, but really it's one of the core competencies of SE is to avoid giving them an opportunity to bounce back, to double down on their position because they encounter resistance. So what to do instead? Ask questions that expose problems or contradictions. Focus on epistemology. For anybody not familiar, epistemology is the study of knowledge, the study of how we come to know things. Focus on how they came to know things. Learn how they choose what information to use when coming to their conclusions. Understand their sources. Seek disconfirmation. I will define that soon. The example will be in the next reading. Only give facts when explicitly asked. Be humble in your confidence, which is to say, if you're going to err on terms of your confidence, err low rather than high. Don't be over certain. Being a little under certain is probably not bad, but being over certain just leads into problems. How to navigate facts? Do not introduce the facts. Let them do that. The interlocutor can introduce all the facts they like into the conversation. Don't give them any reason to defend their position. Once you get their defenses up, they're probably not going to have a good SE conversation. So, would anybody like to practice skills on this? I didn't write what the practice skills were. Oh no. How do I practice skills on not talking? Oh no. I'm going to skip this practice of skills. Seeking disconfirmation. This is the next reading. Is multi.
I have a suggestion, like how to practice
please.
it. Like,
Yes.
give some, like, let's unmute someone, and you give some kind of a statement that is something that would trigger people to answer to it.
Oh, sure. Hello, who is my victim? I'm sorry, interlocutor. No, you'd be the interrogator. I would be the interrogator. All right. All lives matter, not just Black lives. Who would like to be unmuted for this?
I'll give this one a go.
Okay.
Hi.
All lives matter. Go ahead.
How did you come to this conclusion?
Well, it's obvious. Humanity, we have to be egalitarian. We have to count everybody the same, and therefore to hold anybody's life as more important than anybody else's life is probably, racism or something. So all lives matter. So in that example, I used definitions and exhibited a value that I'm holding of egalitarianism, which kind of is not what you would expect from somebody fighting against Black Lives Matter. Okay, now getting to disconfirmation. I think Malty was going to read the part of DB. Would somebody else like to step up? Because I don't think Malty's here. Who would be willing to read the part of DB? Let me bring up Dialog. This should be Dialog, page 1. Did I hear somebody?
Me, Reed?
Yes, thank you, Reed. Would you read the part of DB? Let me read the introduction. I, Peter, I'm going to read the part of Dr. Bogosian. I, Peter, had the following conversation with one of my father's friends, DB. DB was economically and socially conservative, lived in a 55-plus retirement community in Las Vegas, and was in his early 60s. The following conversation begins media res. Go ahead.
Question that the media is biased against Trump. I don't understand if you won't admit it or you don't believe it.
Neither, really. I'm just trying to figure out the best example of this. What's your best example?
I told you already, the entire Russian malarkey. It's all horseshit, all of it. They, the liberal media establishment, are absolutely out to get him. I spoke a few minutes about why various allegations against Trump are false.
Okay, so what would it take to change your mind? I mean, what evidence could you be provided with that would convince you he colluded with the Russians before the election?
I just explained why it's all false.
I mean, hypothetically. What evidence would persuade you? What would you find persuasive? I'm not saying I can provide that evidence. I'm just trying to figure out what it would be.
Well, there is no evidence because it's all bullshit.
Okay, maybe I'm not doing a good job explaining myself. Let's try this. If WikiLeaks exposed emails from someone high up in Trump's camp that detailed collusion, would you believe it then?
No, I'd believe they'd be faked.
What if there were corroborated somehow by other emails from other leaked sources?
I told you they'd be faked.
What if Putin came out on Russian TV and told the world he collaborated with Trump before the election? Would you believe then?
Pause. No, he'd just be doing that to ruin the reputation of the United States.
Sorry for interrupting. What if Trump admitted it under oath? Would you believe then?
Long pause. I don't know.
Under what conditions could the belief be false? Doubt is best served when the conditions of disconfirmation are imagined. Many things are true by definition, so the only way to disconfirm is to change the definition. Imagine aliens hijack a beer truck. Anyway, that's what the next section is called. Your friend points to a truck and says, that truck over there is filled with beer. And you ask, how do you know that? They reply, it has beer written on the side. The driver is in beer uniform. I like beer uniform, beer. And it's the middle of the day. So how do you know that is not the best question. How could you be wrong about that is probably a better question. Providing a counterexample may be just what they need to dismiss and reinforce their prior conclusion. If they can come up with their own list of alternatives, they might find a plausible option in there. That might help them calibrate their doubt. There are three categories. A belief that cannot be wrong. This is called epistemic closure or doxastic closure. We love jargon. And means that the believer is fundamentally certain. They do not recognize any data or evidence that could change their confidence. Most doxastic closure is about underlying moral claims. Sometimes these claims are so vague that if they spell them out, they will reconsider just from that. Sometimes a person can get doxastically closed just from anchoring because they learned it early enough to never question. And by anchoring, I mean that you learned something, and because you knew it in the past, it sticks. It's just got anchored in there for whatever reason. Consider someone who has opposed needle exchange programs, learning that they were wrong and having to contend with their guilt for having supported something that causes unnecessary suffering. Sometimes the anchoring is there just because for a person to admit that they were wrong in a way that they would find morally reprehensible is enough cognitive dissonance to get them to stop thinking a lot of the time. The second one is wildly implausible disconfirmation criteria. If someone says, what would it take to disconfirm, and they give you the bones of Christ with DNA tests to show that they're not someone else's bones, hopefully we'd recognize that as a wildly implausible criteria. And to be clear, even if this evidence were presented, it would not be accepted. This is belief in belief that is based on the moral assertion that it is good to believe something. So just the believing in it becomes the anchoring motivation. Usually there is a moral overreaction when discussing these beliefs. They will be wildly shocked at you for not accepting these things or for holding these alternative negative moral situations that they're holding. They're, how do I say? By not believing it, you are exhibiting values that they find reprehensible because they have the belief in belief. Ask why their disconfirmation criteria are what they are. So if they have disconfirmation criteria that's wildly outlandish, find out why that's important. And if you can ask for disconfirmation criteria for mundane, you might see that they are different and be able to highlight that. For you to understand that this baseball player was the MVP this year, all you had to do was look at a book or you accepted Wikipedia. But for this other claim, you require stacks of PhDs and nobody who disagrees and things like that. And then the third is disconfirmable. Hopefully that's where all of my beliefs are. If someone has reasonable conditions, they are doxastically open. And by reasonable conditions, I mean what would convince them becomes like a reasonable, tangible thing. Now all we have to do is work out how likely those conditions hold to calibrate doubt, at least to a first order of approximation. In SE, we're not trying to get down to precise doubt. We're mostly trying to back people off hundreds and zeros into a middle range, and then it's up to them to decide where their confidence is. Define exactly what conditions would qualify. Vague is no good here. Next, define how to qualify sources, like we did in Chapter 4 last. You might expose some unread library effect, and for review, that's where somebody saw a book that came to a conclusion. They assume all of the things that were in the book. They haven't read it, and so they use that as a reference, and they don't remember that they haven't read any of the information. And when they don't have the conclusions, when they don't know the math or they don't know the reasons, that can help ratchet their confidence down into a more moderate level. Shoot those messengers. Shoot the messengers. There is a big temptation to deliver direct messages here. Especially when you're talking about disconfirmation criteria, it's very easy to ask a question that has the right answer baked right into it. And that's a pretty direct message, and people aren't going to be confused because you framed it in the form of a question, Alex Trebek. For perfect tens, and I don't mean Tom Jump's ideal love interest, I mean someone that pegs the scale on confidence. By the way, the writers of the book use a scale of 10. Great. Confirm that there is no information, even hypothetical, that could move their confidence. When somebody is saying 10 or 0, the first question is, so there's nothing that could change your mind. If you can bring that hypothetical, you can decide whether that was just a mistake in 10 because they rounded up from 9 or something. So learn about their belief, learn about their epistemology, switch to morality or identity in the conversation. Ask whether good people should be willing to revise their beliefs. Or just abort, because if somebody's completely stuck, maybe that's not where you want to spend your time. And aborting while maintaining good rapport is a lot better than dragging them down a rabbit hole until one of you gives up. Now, the book says to ask on a 9. Why not 10? Why not 8? I say don't pick on their confidence. Just let it be. Get their epistemology, hear them out. Don't push back. Just learn their reasons. So here, I'm disagreeing with the book. I'm telling you what the book says. It says on a 9, see if you move them up to a 10 or an 8. And I think you should just treat it sort of like you would with any of these. And not get hung up on that they might be in a highly doxastically closed situation. Just go through the process anyway. For more tips and skills for dealing with perfect 10s, that'll be in Chapter 7, 2 sessions from now, 3 weeks from now, because we'll be taking off next. Questions for perfect 10s. So, this is not about evidence, correct? This might be about definition. This might be about morality. And as soon as you can get to that comparison, I should say, the sooner you get to that comparison, the better. Do you have other beliefs that are held with such certainty? If there are no other beliefs that are held, then what is different about this belief that puts it in a class of its own? And if they do have other beliefs, then you say, what is unique about this belief compared to the other beliefs? So this belief that we have, or maybe what is unique about your class of beliefs for which you have complete certainty? You can go either way. What are other examples of beliefs you are not willing to change? How is it a virtue to not revise this better? And would you be a good person if you didn't hold this belief? That's another one, because if they're tied to a moral standpoint, that's probably going to be yes in an honest sense. And what are examples of people who don't hold that belief, who are good people? I have skills practice here in my notes. And if somebody's willing to jump up and do some examples of this, that's fine. And I also recognize there's a lot of people in the room, so it's hard for to step up publicly.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was wondering
Yes, please.
if we could go back to what you were saying about the Grimm's fairy tales, because I believe a lot of people's mics were suppressed and nobody really had a chance to address that.
Okay, yeah, the very first skills practice, and thank you. I'm glad to hear that it was technical and not the issue. So that was back in section 1, and I was giving an example for Grimm's fairy tales of how you could mirror things back. Anthony gave an example of the mirroring relating to Grimm's fairy tales. Would you like to have a hack at I'll give you the Grimm's fairy tales and you reflect it back to me?
I could attempt it.
Yes, okay. I think that every story has a little bit of truth in it. And I also think that stories that are compelling and stay in the culture for a long time evidence more truth. That's evidence of truth. So I think the Grimm's fairy tales really did happen.
All right. So you think because so essentially the claim is that because good messages are in those books, the stories must have been true?
I'm not sure if it's good messages. I'm thinking more that it's messages that are persistent. And I think that there is a good to it, but also bad messages could be persistent too. But bad messages like negative moral examples, cautionary tales, things like that.
And how is it possible that the messages were meant as maybe metaphors? Or maybe is it possible that you're misinterpreting the message?
Yeah, I actually don't think that the lady with the gingerbread house was in fact a witch. I think she and probably the gingerbread house was only had candy in a little bit of section, things like that. But so it was metaphorical, and like somebody showing up in a windowless white van saying, "Hey kids, want some candy?" It was one of those metaphors, I think.
Right, it's possible. Yeah. Well, I guess that's all I got. It's hard for me to understand as well because there's so many Grimm's fairy tales. I wikied it real quick just to get a better understanding. Now, I would say this: is there, because I don't know all the stories, is there anything in those stories that today may seem like it would require a bit more belief in the supernatural? Because again, we use the example with the witch. I could totally see that just being some crazy woman in a dilapidated home in the woods.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything in the story of Hansel and Gretel that actually demonstrated the supernatural.
Mhm.
So I don't see any requirement there.
And what about
I think the big bad wolf with Red Riding Hood, the wolf was probably a human, realistically. It wasn't a wolf. It was, metaphorically a wolf.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that.
no
Thank you for
problem.
that feedback, Moses.
Yeah, thank you.
Hopefully it's clear to everybody that I don't actually think that about Grimm's fairy tales. Okay, where was I? I was at the end of Disconfirmation. Yes, so, yes and but. In the world of comedic improvisation, the idea is to keep a scene going by building onto what a scene partner says. It's called yes-anding. If I say, wow, look at how many stars are visible in the sky, I think I might need to reset. Thank you. Okay. If I said, wow, look at how many stars are in the sky, in an improv class, the one thing you would not be allowed to say, yes, but it's broad daylight. How can you see stars? You're not allowed to do that. You would have to agree that it was nighttime and that there were a lot of stars that could be seen in the sky. It might be possible that, oh, yes, and all the fireworks or something. You can yes and, but you can't ever but in improvisational stuff because you'll just kill the scene. You'll grind the scene right there. Good riddance, but. The word but is a conversation stopper and shows you that what a scene partner said, and shows that you understood what a scene partner said, even in disagreement or conflict. Some comparisons. Yes, and how should we deal with the children of illegal immigrants? I'm going to say it again. Yes, and how should we deal with the children of illegal immigrants? Versus, yes, but how should we deal with the children of illegal immigrants? And whatever example, the use of but really makes a big defense making. By not necessarily starting with yes, you can still remove but from the conversation. You don't have to use yes. Instead, you can say, that's a great idea. And how about those felons who want to purchase guns or something? Compared to, that's a great idea, but what about whatever else? Even if you disagree, you can still say, interesting. And so that note that these are calibrated questions. They are not yes or no questions. It's not just something that they can answer quickly. You're going to ask them to elaborate on their position. Use and, not but. This demonstrates the listening and learning stances from Rappaport's rules by adding to what your partner says instead of contradicting. Interesting and I hear you are popular. Interesting means that you find something your conversation partner said notable, not necessarily that you agree with them. As Harvard Negotiation Project co-founder William Ury suggests, try something like, I can see why you feel strongly about this. Let me tell you, if you don't mind, how it looks from my angle. In this instance, if you don't mind replaces the however, which is also almost a synonym for but. Would anybody like to model saying but or not but? Yes, JCC.
Okay, I'd like
Yes,
to join in.
Please.
So this is improv.
Okay, so let me give you something to work off of. Something that you would not agree with. I know the Earth is flat and there is a dome above my head. What I'm not sure about is whether it's 100 kilometers high or higher or lower.
So I'm on the side where I agree the world is flat, or I disagree the world's flat.
I'm trying to give you an example that you would probably disagree with and would
Okay.
want to say but. And
Right.
your trick is to not say but.
Okay. Well, the Earth is not flat, and there are other ways to see that it's not flat.
Okay.
As far as the dome above my head,
Mm-hmm.
100 kilometers above me, I cannot. There's no way of me knowing that there is a dome, because I don't have a vehicle or a way to go up above to explore it.
Right. Right. You don't
So,
know, so
I don't
we
know.
can infer it by
Right.
zetetic science.
Right. And so I have no idea to prove that there is or is not a dome above my head.
Right.
As far as my knowledge and other sources, our planet is not flat.
I think you can see that it's flat, and I think you are only taking outside authorities that wish to control your mind to believe that it is other than flat.
Well, I find it hard to find that it's flat because people have traveled around the world, and as far as I know,
Sure.
no one has reached the edge of the Earth.
Right, because there's military. I mean, they reached the ice wall, no problem. We've seen pictures of it, and the up is still up, and the water's not flowing in other directions, and everything else. It's painfully obvious.
The ice wall?
Yeah. Have you ever watched documentaries with Antarctica?
Yes.
With the water, and then there's this big wall of ice.
Oh yeah.
Going up there on the edge of the continent. Sometimes it's even sloughing ice off, but
Have we not gone
glaciers
over
and
the
things.
ice wall?
Well, the people tell us we have, and the military controls access to that area, so there's no way that the common man could learn that without being in a controlled situation where they control an airplane and they land it somewhere, and they have a pretty barber pole, and they say, and there's the South Pole. Isn't that cool? And they have magnets in the ground or something to fool your compasses. I don't know.
Right. I beg to differ due to the fact, can we both say that we've been in outer space?
I haven't been.
No.
I don't think there is a place. But
mankind has gone outer space.
Oh, has mankind? Well, something like they've got like 500 people in that conspiracy that say they have, and they all say the same thing, and it's like it's like the cold case detective says, nobody ends up with exactly the same story. If they all have the same story, they definitely colluded. So I can discount that easily.
So you're saying the fact that no one has the same story, that it disproves?
No, they all have the same story.
Okay.
So it's a made up story. If they had slightly different stories, that would lead more credence to that they'd actually seen something and they weren't just reading off a script.
So the stories that you're referring to are people saying they see stuff when they went in outer space?
Yeah, like they talk about the observer effect, and everyone says, "Oh, then I had the observer effect." And
so how can we disprove that we have missions to the moon, we have a space station, that we have video confirmation and communication with people that are in the space station? So those are.
Do you know where I am?
Not. I'm presuming you're on this planet, and we're using the wonderful world of.
Exactly. I can tell you that I'm on a boat in Los Angeles Harbor, but you'd have no information other than what I fed you to make me think so.
Hang on, I had a glitch. I missed a little bit of it. So,
I said, you use video. You cannot tell where the video is coming from. I could tell you that I'm in Los Angeles Harbor on a boat, but you'd have only my word for it. And I could show you water, but that wouldn't prove much of anything.
you use but. I'm not allowed to use but you are?
But yes, I'm the I can use but all I like because I'm the interlocutor. You're the one doing the SE.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I was just trying to follow that. That's all.
Yep.
So, yes, you can feed and tell me, but I dropped the but word.
That's okay.
Yeah. So
this is fun. This is much fun. Keep going.
Oh yeah, I'm enjoying it. So the fact that yes, you can feed me information that may or may not be true, that there is reliable tracking devices that I can pin your location and know that you are in Los Angeles.
Especially who controls those tracking devices?
The people, the sources who have access to the signal being sent around the area. So once again,
okay, so like the cell phone companies or the whoever like that. Yeah, the information. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, and they're either fooled or they're in on it.
True. So then those stories would have to. So you're saying that if I was able to communicate with somebody who is in control of the server, that's that they have to jive with your story, then it would be legitimate that you are feeding me that you're in Los Angeles, but you're actually somewhere else.
Well, I might be. I mean, the answer is I think I'm in Los Angeles, but what do I know? I see signs, right? What does it mean to be in Los Angeles? I mean, I think so, but how did I get here? I got here on a train, on a plane, on a car, or something like that. Somebody else drove. How would I know? Even I get on a road and it goes up to a place, and I get off at the exit that says, what do I know?
So you don't have trust in what you can see for yourself and understand that you're in reality, that you are in Los Angeles?
I believe that when I look around, I see a place that has signs that says it's Los Angeles. But what that means is that there's a place that has signs that says Los Angeles. If I were to look at a map that doesn't have state borders on it or something like that, there might be text that says Los Angeles or something like that. What does that mean?
It's a label that society has given the area of location.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And somebody tells me that Washington, D.C. is in that direction 3,000 miles. How do I know that? I can't measure it.
Is there a way that you could research and find out if what the information someone told you is true?
Yeah. Yeah, I could find out some information about what's true. Obviously, about whether Los Angeles is the real Los Angeles, I think might be getting into dicing definitions. I think there is a place called Los Angeles. But where that is relative to other things, I don't know that I have the equipment or capability to actually figure that out. If I drive to Phoenix or something, how would I know I'm even pointing the same direction the whole time?
Why would
the road
it matter?
Could gently curve into. Why would it matter? Well, there's a large conspiracy to get us to believe that the Earth is some kind of a globe. And they have lots and lots of convenient ways to keep me from actually checking, like no flights that go from like Tierra del Fuego to South Africa directly at all. They all come up through like you'd have to on a flat.
So you're saying due to the fact there's no direct flights from one location to another, it proves that the Earth is flat?
No, that shows that they are unable to make the fake as good as they would like. If the fake was more complete, there would be something like direct flights. And right now, I think they don't have the technology to get jets to fly that fast, to go around what appears to, on their maps, be a short distance, and on the real map is a much longer distance.
On the
Thank you,
flat map,
JCC. Yeah, go ahead.
On the flat map, it's a shorter distance to get from destination A to destination B. And
No,
no, okay,
not always. I mean, in the case of, like, if I wanted to go from Los Angeles to Moscow, it would be relatively short because I could fly almost past the North Pole. But if I wanted to go from New Zealand to South America, on the globe map is a shorter distance than on the real map. The real map shows it much farther, and that's why they can't simulate those flights.
Can you help me understand real map to the fake map?
Well, the real map is the flat Earth map. It's the one with the North Pole in the center and the ice wall around the. It's the one that comports with all of our observations. All of us see a flat horizon.
Would that possibly be a perspective as to your location on the planet? Is why we perceive it to be flat? Because that's as far as our human vision can see.
See, you agree with me.
I agree that it's perceived.
Yeah, it's perception, perspective.
Right. So, but if I was
that's all we have.
Is it possible to walk to the end of the Earth and see down?
I don't know what's beyond the ice wall. All I have is bullshit and misinformation about that area. So I mean, maybe it's possible, or maybe it's not possible to get through the dome. I'm not sure.
This ice wall is on. Is it on both sides?
It's all the way around.
All the way around.
And apparently,
it's not traversable. Oh, we're glitching. Are we back?
I am back, I think. Oh, good.
Yeah.
I'm back. There was a little interruption there. Thank you, JCC. That was awesome.
That was
you
awesome.
kick ass. You rock. Thank you for that.
So do you, Juggler.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next section. Dealing with anger. 4 facts about anger. Anger beligns and derails conversations. Anger seeks its own justification. There's a big difference between how we reason when we're angry. Emotions have a refractory period, and a refractory period means that there's a time frame between peaks of emotions. It's almost like we use up a particular emotion juice. It doesn't really work that. There's some potential there. And before we have another big spike of that emotion, there will be a time. If you get angry, it's going to take a time to become unangry. And the fourth is understanding anger helps to mitigate its influence. If you understand anger well and you can deal with anger, you can make it not be the big tank that drives down the middle of the road, knocking cars off both sides. So in SE, don't blame. Don't make negative assumptions. Don't assume negative things about a person. We want to be listening as generously as we can. Don't continue if you feel unsafe. I don't actually mean unsafe in the sense of, I think this person's going to grab my microphone and beat me with it. It's not even nearly that high. Obviously, that would be unsafe, but unsafe might even be emotionally unsafe or feeling just overwhelmed or something like that. You don't actually have to have fear of a real consequence, fear of an emotional consequence. Do this during your conversations. Do monitor for signs of anger in yourself or the interlocutor. If either one of you is annoyed, pissed off, angry, this isn't going to work. We're going to have to solve that, mitigate that problem before we'll be able to have further productive conversation. In the case of anger, timeout. Remember that refractory period? Getting a timeout might really help. That timeout might be as short as a little pause. It might be 5 seconds. It might be 5 minutes. It might be tomorrow. Do pause. Do listen. Do acknowledge when there's an opportunity to say a positive thing about what they've said. Take that opportunity. Go ahead and take a little time to say, wow, JCC, you did an excellent job. Only a few messages in there, and mostly you were quite pleasant and easy. Thank you for that. Do abort. I know sometimes these conversations can take a lot of effort to get an interlocutor. I've heard in some cases people doing interviews asking 50 people per interview that they get. Sometimes a 50-to-1 ratio between invitations and actual acceptance. In those conditions, it could be terribly pressureful to, it would be really weird to just say, oh, okay, I hit a little tiny speed bump, I'm going to abort now. Though, if you do rapport well, and you can leave the conversation when rapport is still positive, there's a real good chance you can get a repeat, another conversation further down the road. Do this before your conversation. Before you start doing SE, recognize your anger. Recognize what triggers you. What are the kind of content? What kind of comments would trigger you? What kind of things would cause you to react strongly to it? That might be easy enough to imagine, and it might even be a rare person who would bring those up, but it's a good idea to be prepared for that. Do remember the refractory period. There's a time frame involved in emotions. You can't just change your mind to stop having an emotion. Imagine, if anybody would be willing to imagine a trigger, what's something that would normally annoy you? Feel free to throw it in the text and we can unmute you if there's anybody who has a trigger, something that would annoy them. I'd love some example.
When people read things, but they're like whispering it to themselves, so you just kind of hear it in the background behind you, them whispering to themselves, because that annoys
weird.
me.
Okay, that's interesting.
Could be mean on my part because that person just could have a hard time reading in her head or in their head. Sorry, I kind of gave away
Sure.
what it was, but so I understand it could just be a problem on my part, but
it might be. I remember from I think it was Consciousness Explained by Daniel Dennett. He was a big fan of people subvocalizing or even vocalizing, because in his thought, then all of your brain can hear what's going on as opposed to just the part that's doing the thinking about it. So he thinks subvocalization is a way to marshal our entire brain or our entire consciousness into a single. I don't know. Maybe he's good. Yes. Distracted conversation partners. I'm often guilty of that because I tend to way too much. So yes, I agree that that's something that the distracted conversation. And I see several people are. There's a special note about acknowledging anger. In English, in Western society, even to say anger can sometimes be a trigger to anger. So better to use synonyms like frustration or other synonyms. Best practices for dealing with anger, that is, no counterattack. Bite your tongue. Don't type angry. If you're in a conversation online, just take your time. You don't need to tweet right back. You don't need to respond to that email right away. If you can wait until you're no longer emotionally involved in it, you will probably do a better job, and it's certainly safer. Listen, listen, listen. Just keep listening. When in doubt, listen. I heard something earlier today. Nobody listened their way out of a job ever. Nobody ever listened so much that they lost their job over it. Acknowledge tension. If you're detecting tension in the conversation, it's completely okay to say that. Maybe avoid use the word anger, but you can say, I see we feel strongly about that. Or I do, or you do, or that kind of. Maybe the you. We try to avoid you a bit. Slow down. A lot of emotional reactions are much, much less when the pace is slower. Use empathy, which is to say something pathetic after tension. If there's been tension, try to say something relating, acknowledging. Those are good. And do abort from angry rants. FK says, put yourself in the other person's shoes. It may help. It helps many times. JCC likes, I hear you. Jason says, people assigning bad intent without evidence. Ooh, there's so much of that. You person on the other side of some political wedge issue, you who are. Yes, indeed. Yes, and Ragnar says that, of course, it might be uncomfortable if their foot size is too small, putting yourself in each other's shoes. That's a psych. Okay. These tools will help you engage in conversations around more contentious topics, those that involve politics, religion, and resonate deeply with a person's moral identity are contentious. And I open it to the room for any skills practice. If anybody have any examples of any of these things that we can play through, and otherwise complete. If the interlocutor has a bad epistemology, nick their Nikes. Got it. Steal their shoes. No. Go ahead, JCC. You do?
Yes. A lot of people will allow their misunderstandings increase their anger and emotions and not have a rational conversation.
Very common. Very common. That's the main thing we're shooting for. Gigi is typing. Probably has something lovely. We'll see. Okay, and we are coming up on an hour. I'm fine to go over an hour if anybody has anything important to say. I don't have to be tight. People assuming what I think or feel before I have a chance to say it myself is a trigger. So, as in another chapter, finish people's sentences. Ooh, do that. I know when it happens to me, it often hits me where it doesn't go where I intended to, but it steps on my thinking process so much. I have to stop and reformulate my sentence from the beginning. Very tedious, and every once in a while I forget what I was talking about. It's just icky. So yes, thumbs up, especially on that particular. Oh yes, you're getting lots of acknowledgement on that one. Lots of people think that's true.
One might be if the other
Yes.
person gives so many different arguments in a row that it's really difficult to address them.
So Ricktick says, when people claim to be knowledgeable enough about evolution to discard the belief in evolution. Yes, JCC calls it a buffet of issues. Yes, it's fun. I like that for the Gish Gallop. Shapiroing. I have a lot of opinions about Ben Shapiro, and I'm not even sure I can tell which one is Shapiroing. But yes, indeed. thank you all for joining us for this book club study. Thank you, Gigi, for helping me write the summary. Thank you all of those who read and all of those who participated in the practices. I really appreciate. Go ahead, Moses.
No, I was going to say thanks for hosting. This was fun.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. And so thank you all for joining. I couldn't do this without you. I wouldn't do this without you. Here are 5 of my favorite street epistemology related channels, or street epistemology centric channels. This is only 5, and I have something like 12 or 13 on the promoted channels list on my YouTube channel. If you are really into this method of street epistemology, you can go to streetepistemology.com, where they have gathered the community resources, not exactly wiki style, maybe that'll happen in the future, but all the different things that you need. Almost one-stop shopping here at streetepistemology.com, brought to you by Street Epistemology International. Thank you for... Oh, no, that's not what I meant. Title. That's what I meant. It's that thing. Thank you all for joining me for this study group book club. If you would like to be a guest on my show, I have a lot of different categories that are about SE. I only ask that you be articulate, polite, willing to show your face, and willing to stay on a topic that's either SE or something about SE. And I have a category for you. So I really look forward to hearing from you.